we're not a team because we work together, we're a team because we respect, trust, and care for each other, that really kind of stuck with me after I read it, because I really do feel that's kind of how we are. We don't just work together. We do have a lot of respect for each other. We do care about what's going on with each other, and we do have trust, because we have to have trust for the level of things that we have to get accomplished and the help we have to ask for from one another. So this really kind of resonated with me, and it's kind of stuck with me throughout the summer. I'm pretty sure the admin team memorized it because they've seen it a few times. But with this in mind, I was also thinking about, why I ask certain people to come speak to us at the beginning of the school year. And really, I typically choose people because I want us to start as a team thinking about things philosophically, kind of changing our mindset, because we have to start growing and looking at how we react to the things that are before us. We have a lot of hard work to do, and we do a really good job at it, but we also let it wear us down. And so I know that everyone in the room can probably identify somebody else sitting in the room that they watch get worn down over the course of the school year. Sometimes it happens really early. Sometimes people can hold it in and fake it until we get to state testing, and then you fall apart, and then it's kind of an explosion by that point. But we all know it happens. We internalize a lot of the things that go on, and a lot of times we allow ourselves to feel like things are being done to us. And I think that if we really are going to be an example of what I think we are, which is that we trust each other, is that we really have to start being able to take a look at the things that are bothering us and take a look at how could we personally react differently, think about them differently, and kind of conduct our business together differently. So when I was talking to one of my friends outside of work who's not a teacher, not in education, and I was telling this person about you guys and about how I'm trying to find someone to come in and help me take you guys to a different level of how we're working together. And I had told them that, I called this person and I thought it was going to be great. He wrote this really cool book, and then, he was going to charge me $175,000 for 75 minutes. And so then, I got made fun of, did you call Oprah, blah, blah, blah. But what he did say is, I know this person that I don't know if he does education or not, but I know that he talks about mental toughness, which is what it sounds like you need, and it sounds like that's what your staff needs. So I went and looked him up. I looked up the Chris Doris, who my friend told me about, and I found out, he started as a social worker, and then he is a sports psychologist as well. Of course, he got his graduate degree at ASU, so that puts him above the rest anyway. But then I also noticed that when you see what he has to say about what he does and how he believes and how he coaches people, I really realized that he can relate to who we are and what we do, because he's also been in the service industry. And I think you have to be in service to help people who are in service. Because, we do a whole lot for maybe not as much as we feel that we're worth. And we don't get a lot of thanks every day. But we have to put our heart into everything we do. And when you put your heart in, then your heart gets hurt sometimes, your brain gets hurt, you get frustrated. And so I started watching some of Chris's videos, and I realized that he kind of has a couple of the missing pieces, some of our missing pieces. So you've heard me talk about the 10-80-10 principle, where we talk about there's 10% of us that are be like, yay, I'm going to do whatever, it's going to be great, it's going to be perfect, and you're just going to jump right on board and do whatever is asked of you. Then we've got about 80% of us who are like, yeah, I don't know, it could work, might not work, I'm going to go with the flow, I like having a job, and we just go ahead and we kind of go along with it and do our best. And then we have 10% of us at any given time that are sometimes like, this is some bull nana. I'm not doing it, I think it's stupid, she or he doesn't know what they're talking about, right? And we've talked about that before, and I've talked about that all of us get in that bull nana place every once in a while, myself included. But I have some expectations, which are we don't take hostages with us to that land, and that we figure out how we're going to get out of it. But I've never really given you any tools about how to get out of it. I'm just like, go figure it out. I don't want to hear about it because you're not taking me down, right? And so, in talking with Chris, he does have some ideas and tools and strategies to help us understand how to get out of that spot that we're in. And I think that's something that we really need. Also, we talked a lot about, it's that verbal judo, okay? But we didn't talk a lot about, it's how my brain works, don't shame me. I told you a lot about what it is, and we had some examples, and you came up with some examples, but we didn't spend a lot of time getting down into it. And I really think that when we listen to what Chris has to say about the difference between an expectation and an agreement, I think we're going to start having some of those pieces of things that we know bits about fall into place. Because it's not just that the word is a different word, it really does mean and connotate something totally different when you have an expectation on someone as opposed to when you have an agreement with someone. And so I know Chris is going to talk about that. And these are like putting pieces together of things that I'm trying to put out there, but I don't have all that experience and knowledge to coach us in the proper way. So we're going to learn about it together, and we're going to get coached together through that today in his workshop. I want to tell you one last thing about Chris before I ask him to come up and take over the show. You know, he's different than the other people we've had in one very important way. All of the speakers that I invite to come here to work with us care, they're really cool, they're really fun, they're really jazzy people. They talk to me on the phone for an hour to 2 hours and email me back and forth, and then they come and do their thing. So Chris and I have emailed, we've talked on the phone a bit. He asked me if he could talk to some of you. So there's about, I don't know, 15 or 20 of you that I asked in the spring if he could call you or you could call him and you guys could talk so he could get another perspective, because, wow, he kind of thinks that maybe I'm not the only perspective that's important here. It's not just about what I want to have happen at the end. It's about what's going on in other people's minds as well. And then in addition, he asked me to come to his office so he could talk to me about what he was thinking and planning and make sure that we were on the same page with what I would like to see as the outcome from today. And you know, that really speaks to, this is a very personalized workshop for our school by someone who really does care that we really get a grip on where we're at with our mental toughness and start understanding how to use some tools and strategies so that we can be strong, that we can support one another, but that we can also be strong for ourselves so we can give our best to our kids. So I'm really excited to introduce Chris, and I'm excited for the next 3 hours that we're going to spend learning with him.
Thank you, Carrie. That's a beautiful introduction.
Dr. Poe, figure it out.
So let's spend a little bit of time in the beginning creating context for our morning, all right, so that we can have, so that you can take as much out of this as possible. I want to spend some time talking about what we're not doing, and then a little bit of time on what this actually is. Okay, so what this isn't is a motivational speech. And it's important for me to clarify what I mean by that, because you know, when people, I tell people I'm a speaker and I'm a mental toughness trainer, and they say, "Oh, so you do motivational speaking?" And I always say, "No, I absolutely don't do that. I do what you could consider maybe the opposite of that. I'm a trainer. This is not a speech. This is a group coaching session, right?" So. Very brief history of my professional evolution. I started, as Kerry said, as a social worker working with chronic schizophrenics and drug addicts on the streets of Atlantic City, working with populations that were hurting, struggling hard. And that was a perfect training ground, like foundational place for me to start. And I only know that now in retrospect. You know, working with people who are really, really struggling. And what I learned from some of them is that for whatever, the folks who, for whatever combination of reasons, mental toughness, were able to do anything to enhance their lives, anything, to take better care of themselves, seem to be the ones that get the break. So it's like the more you take care of yourself, the more life takes care of you. Question, how many people in this room have had any formal mental toughness training in your life? 0 hands, right? That's criminal to me, because what I mean by mental toughness is learning how to simply use your mind in ways that serve you. Right? We have a brain. We are not our brains, and our brains govern how our lives unfold. It was Buddha who said, "Your life unfolds according to the way that you think." Well, where's the thinking training? Where is it? You know, I went to graduate school for psychology, and I never had a class. I didn't have any classes in kindergarten, didn't have any classes in grade school, high school, college in psychology, and graduate school even. You think that I might have had a class that taught me practical methods on how to strengthen the way that I use my mind, because my mind governs the way my life unfolds. So I have, you know, I always carry, I appreciate your comments, and I always take time before I do a talk or before I do a workshop. But I have a particularly selfish interest in this group. This is the first time in my life that I've had the opportunity to do a workshop with educators. I'm on a mission to integrate mental toughness training as fundamental curriculum. I believe that this world would be profoundly more peaceful and powerful, and the people in it would be living more powerfully if we learned from an early age how to use our minds more intelligently, more powerfully, how to choose to interpret reality in ways that have it be easier to create excellence, be successful, how to stop experiencing reality problematically and instead experience it opportunistically, and have that not be a euphemism, to have that be legit, that my auto response to everything that occurs in my life is at worst fascinating or curious, and at best enthusiastic. Because enthusiasm, we're going to be talking a lot today about how to choose your moods, how to create moods, how to alter your states, your psychological states at will. Enthusiasm is one of the states that is the most intelligent state to choose. I'm going to use that language like that all day. One of the most intelligent states that you could ever choose to think your way into. Because that's what we do, is we think our way into every state that we ever experience. Now, enthusiasm is a fascinating one because what it does is it releases the neurotransmitters that are the on switches for all intelligent centers of the brain. Does anybody know what those transmitters are? What was that? Dopamine and serotonin. They travel through the dendrites. It's a neurology lesson now. But those are the chemicals. Those are the chemicals that have us be smart. Right? Enthusiasm is a fascinating word because it comes from the Greek word entheos, right? Which means the creator within. Right? And in theos, the creator within. The creator within each of us. We create our lives. We are the authors of how our lives unfold, but we are not exercising that authority to the extent that we could. Another way of describing what we're going to do this morning is unlearning. You could make the argument easily that mental toughness training is more about unlearning than it is about learning. Every one of us is conditioned powerfully by our pasts. We are exposed to ways of experiencing reality, thinking about life, and interpreting it that really have us struggle, that have us settle, struggle, or worse, suffer. So my work is about eliminating that. I believe that it is unnecessary for anyone to settle, to struggle, or worse, suffer. We create all of our own suffering with the way that we interpret reality. And again, we haven't had education on how to do that, how to strengthen the way that we interpret reality. Not formally. So this is particularly exciting for me because what I want to do is share with you as the user of these tools. I want to share disciplines. And that's why this is a coaching workshop. I will not leave this room without having fulfilled my pledge, which is to disseminate to you uber practical techniques, technologies, disciplines, and practices that if you, capital I, capital F, you then go integrate into your daily practice. If you integrate these tools into the way that you live, it will be impossible for your life, all disciplines, to elevate. And that's not a bold statement. That's just like saying, you know, if I let go of this Hershey's bar, I can guarantee you it's going to fall. It's not bold. That's gravity. We get it. It's a law, right? If I strengthen the way that I'm using my mind, every area of your life is going to elevate. But it takes practice, and that's important to reiterate. After today, after our morning session, you will have tools at your disposal that you can use, that you can practice. and then that you could maybe creatively integrate into your interactions with your students and your family members and anybody else that you're interacting with in the world. But first, let's have you learn the tools and practice them. So let's talk a little bit more about the unlearning. Let's just do some exercises on that. Does everybody have a handout? A packet of handouts, actually? Oh, I see that you all got the book, The Four Agreements.
Yeah,
That's phenomenal. Has anybody here ever read that before? Yeah, I love Don Miguel Ruiz. He's a phenomenal author. You're going to love that book. It's powerful. So the first page of the handout, does anybody not have a packet? Okay, so the top page is a question. Now, I want you to just please listen. I'm going to say, I think almost verbatim what's on the page, but listen to what I'm saying. I want to ask everyone to think of a number that corresponds to the most money that you can imagine getting a hold of under any circumstance in a year's time. I'm going to repeat that. Think of a number that corresponds to the most money that you can imagine getting a hold of under any circumstance in 1 year's time, and then write that number down on the page. Okay. So what do you got?
200,000.
200 grand. What else?
0.
What? That's a first. That's a first.
I think you have a hidden agenda.
Oh, I totally have a hidden agenda. It's not hidden anymore. No, I definitely have an agenda. 100,000? 200 million? A million? Okay, now, with the exception of 0 of you, because it won't work mathematically, can everyone else, can you double your number and still imagine that? Can anyone not do that? You cannot. What was your number? Okay. So you guys, you know where we're going with this. However, I must say that that's not an actual amount. That's the theoretical. But you know where we're going with this. But however, there's still an answer. Like there is a number beyond which you may not be able to imagine. But everybody can double. Everyone else can double your numbers. So somebody said 200 million. So you can imagine 400 million.
Yeah, as long as I get killed by the lottery.
Well, see that's an easy. Right there's a way.
And I took taxes.
That and see and. Well, what did you say?
I took the tax system.
That's
I know it's
after tax.
400 around there.
Right. So no one should be able to double your number. So no one, no one in this room answered the question. Everyone.
Because it's the most amount of money.
That's right.
And if it's the most that you can imagine, then you can't possibly double.
You shouldn't be able to add a penny to it. So this is a fascinating phenomenon. Because every person in this room unconsciously translated the question that I articulated twice verbatim into an entirely other question. Into another question. What was the question that you answered?
So could you realistically imagine?
Yeah, that, right. But some of you probably translate it into what could I earn? What could I make from the wages that I'm accustomed to from this job, right? You put all these parameters around it, you translated it. And I do this all the time. I do it for, in rooms full of hundreds of people, and the same thing happens. There's nothing unique here. But we need to slow it down and just identify what is that. So why did that happen? No one answered the question. There's actually only one legitimate response. Well, you're close. And this is so great because I've been using this exercise for so long. And one time I was meeting at my office with a prospective coaching client. And for whatever reason, she brought her little daughter. I guess she couldn't get a babysitter or something. So she's just coloring on the floor. And I'm talking to the mom about, how a lot of the coaching is about unlearning stuff and freeing yourself from the conditioning of your past that doesn't serve you, that has you play small and think small and all that. And I asked her the money question I just asked you. And as the little girl's coloring, as soon as I finished the question, what's the most money that you can imagine getting a hold of under any circumstance in a year's time? Little girl goes, all of it. That's the only right answer. It would be like asking how many pieces of candy could you imagine dumping onto the floor? What would have had to happen in your life for you to go, Maybe on a good day, I'd say 60%. What would have you would have had to have been brainwashed into thinking that there's something difficult about moving candy out of a basket onto a floor. Well, guess what? You're brainwashed. We are. We're all in a brainwashed state. Sometimes when people say, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm an unbrainwasher. I help people discover the beliefs that have taken up residence in our minds that govern the way we act in limiting ways and getting rid of them. Reauthoring those stories. That's the artwork of this, is the inner world, is paying attention, heightening awareness, right? So you can even know what's going on in there that's governing what goes on in your out here. I love using mantras, and the mantra for that is the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. All right, so what I got going on in my life is the direct result of what I've got going on in my mind. That's what you were talking about, Carrie, when you were talking about the distinction between ownership living and victim living. Right, victim thinking, which we've all learned, would have us become vulnerable infinitely and reactive to what goes on in the world. And we don't want to be that. That doesn't serve us. That doesn't have us be amazing. That has us be vulnerable. Right? It has us be puppets on strings. And like this, well, that's what the term victim of circumstance means. That the circumstances in my life are governing how I show up, how I experience, my ability to even choose joy. So this is like, speaking of, there's an interesting story that illustrates how we all learn to be victims of circumstance, right? Little girl comes home from school, and she's all smiles, right? And her mom's like, oh, wow, honey, look at you, you're so happy. What happened? Did you make a new friend at school today? And the little girl goes, no, there weren't any new students at school today, Mommy. And she goes, well, what happened? Why are you so happy? You guys got cupcakes at recess, didn't you? And she goes, we didn't have cupcakes today, Mommy. And she says, well, I don't know, why are you so happy? You got a sticker for your spelling quiz. And she's like, Mom, we didn't have a spelling quiz, damn it. She didn't say it like that. If she's from Jersey like me, she probably would have said it like that. But now, do you see what is happening here? This is the amazing nature of sneaky conditioning that none of us are exempt from. This is a loving exchange between this precious young girl and her primary role model in the universe, her mom, and embedded within the sweet dialogue is a disastrous learning. Does anybody know what it is? What is it?
She's training
Yeah.
the daughter to find joy in what other people do instead of just being happy.
Bingo. Did you hear that? She's, to summarize, she's teaching her daughter to be a victim. She's teaching her daughter that there's no such thing as causeless joy. She's teaching the daughter that you don't just choose that. Not in this damn house. Honey. So she's teaching her a lot, and it's all unconscious. She's not only teaching her that you can't just choose that state of joy. You can't just opt into it because it's there. Like just picking, like I go over to the basket and pick what I want. Say this is a basket of emotions. What are you in the mood for? Like, why would you pick a Kit Kat if you hate chocolate? Well, why do you choose frustration? Why do you choose anxiety? You're choosing them, just like that. So what's the answer? That's actually a real question. Okay, so, because we don't, I love that answer. So what do you mean?
Well, we just don't know any better. We're responding the way we've always responded, or people around us have responded. As you said, we don't talk to you about how to respond differently. Why
Okay, so you could say it's mindless. We're not, so, and I love that word for this. It is mindless. I am not using my mind. I'm not exercising the ability that we all possess, which is choice. You know, Freud screwed us up a little bit there with the whole stimulus response program. He's like, you know, this thing happens and then there's a response, and then that happens and there's a response, and it's a fixed response, and just deal with it. Go get a therapist, pay out the butt forever to lay on a couch and have them, you know, ask you questions about your relationship with your parents. Well, the piece in the middle, I'm allowed to make fun of that, by the way, because I was a licensed therapist for a very long time. And I have a serious problem with the way I was trained to waste people's time. Saying. By focusing on the problem, as opposed to teaching them how to redirect. So many of the issues that people go to therapy for will be completely addressed by what we're covering today. That's why I gave up my licensure. Because I wasted a lot of people's time. That's why I switched over from counseling, right, working with people on ameliorating their problems, to coaching, which is about creating their dreams. And I use some of the techniques I learned in undergrad and graduate school, but it's not therapeutic. There's no pathology in this work. There's just enthusiasm, just excitement. Right? So yeah, I learned how to stop choosing states that have me settle, struggle, and worse, suffer. So the answer is because we learned to. Right? Like the little girl. Like we all have learned similarly. And we haven't. And this is what I started to say in the very beginning, is that there weren't classes that taught us how to do this stuff all the way through so that we would never get rusty. Right, to continuously practice, strengthening the way that I went to India to do some study, and oh man, this is so amazing. It was called the Oneness University in southern India, outside of Chennai, and that is by far, I've done a lot of stuff in my life on personal development, and that is by far the most powerful. The Oneness University, and rankings, public rankings, shaming. You know, if you do test poorly, you know, it's like classes, testing, and then posting publicly of the results. And if you perform poorly, you could be just given up by your family, go into the sex trade, and that's not an exaggeration. So this guy's like, this is ridiculous. We need to come up with a new way of educating our children. So what he did was he interviewed the parents, and he asked them one question. And he said, would you be happy if your child chose to become a janitor. And if they had any answer other than, if that's what they want, of course, then they were not invited. Because he believes that that child has too much work to do because of the bad parenting. So we would only invite children who were raised in environments where they were trusted for their own judgment. So these kids grew up, the school, their performance was off the charts, it became very threatening to the government, so they pulled the charter. Oh, before that though, but when he started, he got all the kids together. This is so neat. And he got all the kids together who were invited to be the students, and he said, hey, let's make up our rules. And they're all going, is he serious? He's like, yeah, come on, you guys are going to make up the rules for yourselves. And they're all freaked out by that. No one wants to, they're like, is this real? Is this a trap? And finally, one courageous kid raised his hand. He goes, yeah, what's your idea? And he said, can we have no tests, please? And he said, I love that idea, but we have to. I would prefer not to. But in order for us to maintain our charter, in order for us to even be allowed to exist, we have to do that. But that's the kind of thinking I'm looking from y'all, so keep going. And then they all warmed up, and Mom was like, so then can we just test like as many times as we need to get it all right? And he goes, yes. So he created this unbelievably safe environment where the kids weren't afraid anymore of failure. Right? And that means they're playing, in like sports terms, on offense. That activates creative genius. This is why they thrived, because the threat was gone. They weren't in prevent defense mode. They weren't afraid of being stupid. They weren't afraid of failing. They weren't afraid of looking foolish, like having a dumb answer. He did a phenomenal job of creating like the safest place for these students in which they could just express themselves creatively without fear. Then they got shut down because it became a threat. They did so well. It became a threat to the government. And, all right, so who is it? Maybe it's important.
That's probably a parent. That's okay.
I trust things like that. I believe in synchronicity, so let me know if it's relevant. We can include them. Put it on speaker. And I'll ask them the money question. So what he did was he started the Oneness University. So it evolved from a school into this, which is now literally a city. So the teachers, which they call dosages over there, are all the former students of his. They're truly enlightened people. And what I mean by that is nothing grandiose whatsoever. The word enlightened doesn't mean something woo. It just means like light. Like Carl Jung used to say, shine the light of consciousness onto the darkness, and that's just the awakening process. It's just strengthening the way that you use your mind so you live more powerfully. It's that. Bringing the unconscious into the conscious, bringing what's in the dark, the unconscious, into the conscious realm so we can work with it on purpose. Right? So these young teachers are also peaceful. They're also, I remember one night I was standing out front of the dorm where I was staying, and my friend that I was visiting there with, a friend of mine from India who turned me on to the place, knew the teachers, just had been going there for years and years and knew everyone. So we're just standing out front at night, hanging out, and here comes the number one teacher and his best friend, who's the founder's son. The number one teacher, his name is Ananda Giri G. Everybody has their name end in G, J-I. Like I'm Chris G. It's just a thing. It's like dude, but more respectful. So Ananda Giri G, that's Sanskrit. That means his name is Mountain of Bliss. All right. Mountain of Bliss. What's your name? So these folks, because they've been involved in practicing, examining the behavior of their minds and then strengthening it for their whole lives, these folks don't experience inner conflict. Can you imagine that? In fact, I asked my teacher, I said, how do you define enlightenment? And she just smiled, and they're always smiling. And she thought for a while, and she was in no hurry. Perfectly comfortable with the silence because there's no inner conflict, so there's no problem. And then after a while, she looked up and she said, having no internal conflict. And I thought, that is just the coolest answer ever. Can you imagine your life? Can you imagine that? And that's actually a good idea. We're going to do some imagery later. We're going to talk about that as an amazing tool that we all have access to, that we're all actually using in ways that make us struggle, ironically. Can you imagine, just for a second right now, how are you different and how is your life different if you have no internal conflict? Can you envision it? No? I believe it. That's tough, right? Because it's like, Eckhart Tolle is one of my favorite teachers, and he asked this great question: how much of your life do you spend in a state of wishing stuff was different? Like, I don't know, all of it. Most? Really, truly, you think about that. That's amazing. That's an amazing question. And it points out an amazing phenomenon. Like, oh my God, most of my waking life, I have a problem with reality. Where's the fun in that? And we learn that, right? Because that's not really true when we're younger. Right? Like the little girl has causeless joy. That's an important point. That's our like natural state, is to choose, is to be able to exercise our ability to choose elevated states. And I absolutely believe that is what we gravitate until we are well educated to do otherwise. Because it's just nicer. Right? And all of my experience in human peak performance, which I've been doing basically just forever, my entire professional career in some form or fashion, the better we feel, the better we are at everything. Like all research uniformly agrees with that. The higher the state, the better our performance in anything. I mean, if you think about just in your own experience, in any kind of performance, whether it's athletics or music or theater or anything, dance. If you think about your best ever performances, those experiences were characterized by extremely, what I call high-grade states. Most of which are super pleasant. Like I used to work exclusively with athletes for a long period of time. And I've never heard it or read it anywhere where an athlete described their best ever performances as painful or horrible. Where I was totally pissed off. No, that doesn't ever happen. So therefore, we have great incentive to get better at feeling better. And that's really what we're going to do. That's part of most of what we're going to do today. In fact, if I was only allowed to ever do anything, if I was only allowed to coach people on one thing, if I was only allowed to write on one thing, and if I was only allowed to do public workshops on one thing, it would be this thing. It's going to take up half of the morning, which is learning how to voluntarily elevate your state. And then as a result, watch everything get easier and more pleasant. It's that simple. And it is that simple. And I love that it's that simple. I love that. There is nothing complex about anything that we're going to do. All the complexity is taken care of for us. It's like the software. It's in there. It's prepackaged. We just use it. But we're not going to use the software if we don't even know it's there, if we don't even know that it's like an option. All right, so let's do another exercise. Let's do the next one. This one, it's likely that you've seen this before, but I still do it. This is an old one, but even if you have seen it, do it anyway. And if you get the response, if you get the solution to this, just turn your page over so so the other teachers around you won't cheat off your paper. Because that's a thing I hear. Well, I guess not in your experience. Do you ever have students actually together at one time? Or is every, you do?
Not for school.
For lessons for school. So is it possible to cheat? Oh, well, I just was like, are you stupid? Well, that's interesting. Okay, so maybe we'll get that. All right, so here's the exercise. All right, the object is to connect all 9 dots. All right, but I'm going to give you 3 restrictions. All right, those are just only 3 rules beyond which you can do anything to get it done. All right, you got to connect all 9 dots, but you can only use 4 straight lines. You can only use 4 lines, and they all got to be straight ones. All right, you can't lift the pen off the page once you start, and there's no back tracing. All right, I'll repeat that. So the object is to connect all 9 dots, but you can only use 4 straight lines to do it. You can't lift the pen off the page once you start, and there's no back tracing. Got it? All right, have at it. And if you get the solution, then just turn it over. Okay, does everyone have the solution now? You're like, jerk.
I've tried.
Okay, here's a hint. And it ain't much of a hint, but whatever, it's a hint. If you're struggling with this, it's most likely, almost probable, that it's because you are self-imposing unconsciously a 4th restriction beyond the 3 that I gave. And it's that 4th assumption, the unconscious restriction that you're placing on it, that is absolutely forbidding you from being able to see what is honest to God, a super simple solution. So it's just like how you translated the money question into, a question about possibility, your estimate of possibility versus imagination, because that's what you did, right? When you translated the money question, the question was about, it's like the operative word was imagine, right? What's the most you can imagine? But we didn't hear that. You thought, what's the most that you think you could earn? Based on what you've learned is possible. So in much the same way, if you're not seeing the solution, it's because you are also translating, you're self-imposing a 4th restriction. Has anybody got the answer that's never seen this before? And you've never seen it before? Can I see it?
She totally did it.
How many? That's a lot of lines. 4, you can only use 4 lines. And they all got to be straight. That's a lot of lines. But I love that. I gotta reward that though, because she's like, hell yeah, I got it. I love that. No, I love that. And I think we'd all do better to like I was talking about in that school in India. It's like, I got it. I got this. That's wrong. Okay. And there's no shame. And I'm not afraid to try again. And be so bold to say, I think I got it again. Okay, anybody else? Anybody? And this is the first time you've seen it? You got it, brother. Would you please show us the solution? Up there. You don't have to.
Did we fold the page too?
No.
No.
No. Yeah. Yeah, got it. All right, watch this. You're having aha experiences. Hold on to that. That aha experience is huge. Ah, soak that up. Thanks, brother. Way to go. How about a little love? That is, no joke, totally rare. That's totally rare. So go ahead and feel good about that. It is very uncommon for an adult who has never seen this exercise to get it so quickly, too. I mean, that's really rare. I do this every time. Well, you show me that later. I'm interested in that. That's very creative. No, seriously, that's a cool solution. So, what was the fourth rule that you imposed upon yourself? You saw a boundary that did not exist, and you obeyed it. Brainwash. Isn't it interesting? Like, be excited about this. Right? Because like you can assume by virtue of you being in this room, you got a pretty good life. Right? And it can get like way better. If I can free my mind up. There's this interesting thing about circus elephants. And I love this, that's a thing of the past, or very soon will be. But when it was still commonplace for circuses to use elephants, when they would get a new elephant, the trainer had to keep it somewhere, right, when they're not training it or when it's not in the show. So that what they would do is they would just put a rope around one of its legs, tie it to a stake, and stick it in the ground outside. And elephants have amazing memories, right, which is what permits them to migrate across Africa and back on virtually the identical route. Because they remember points, they remember things, right? And sometimes that memory serves them, and sometimes that memory doesn't. Because what would happen here is the elephant would very quickly learn the range that it's free to explore within, right? The length of the rope. So it'd be a big circle. And the length of the rope is the radius. So after it learns that distance, it stops even trying to go beyond that because it knows it's got its markings. Like, I can't go over there. This is the end. At that point, the trainer can take the elephant over to the stake and not even attach the rope because the elephant has already learned the boundary. The elephant is free. There's nothing stopping it from going anywhere now except its mind, except what it's learned. The learned boundary, like this one that we self-impose, right? This is actually the origin of that cliche. You know what the cliche is? Yeah, think outside the box. Not many people know that. So if you want to just have some fun, mess around, next time you hear somebody say that, it's just someone else in context of a conversation says, oh yeah, no, you just need to think outside the box. That's so interesting. Where does that come from? And they're just going to make up some shit. Just let them go. It'd be very impressive if they said, well, actually, there's this cool exercise that illustrates the conditioning of our past. And you're like, whoa. Probably not going to say that. So, why is it that we want to be enthused about the fact that we're in a brainwashed state? All of us are. Why is that good news? Because we can, yes, that's who said that? Because we can change it. Because, as human beings, I believe that we're designed to grow, and so we've got lots of growth opportunity, and that's amazing. We can create much more and more joy, reward, right? Satisfaction, enthusiasm, peace, confidence, competency, and all the high-grade states, and then also be better at everything. Oh, all right, sign me up. I'll take it. All right, so you want to do some work?
Yeah.
Woo! All right, let's get into the meat of it now. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions at this point? Because we've all been doing just theory so far, We're going to start to practice now. Is the next page the power of thought?
Yes.
Yay. So at the top of the page, towards the top of the page, it says Freedom Formula. So the title of the page is The Power of Thought. That's the document that we're referring to right now. The Power of Thought. And as I said earlier, there are these great phrases, and it's been articulated so many different ways by so many different brilliant humans over history, like I mentioned the Buddha one, which is your life unfolds according to the way that you think. William James, one of the fathers of modern-day psychology, is as a person thinketh, so shall they become. Right? Even in more recent stuff like the movie The Secret, thoughts become things. The Secret, by the way, which I think is good, but it's like baby food for training your mind, because it relies almost entirely upon affirmations, not ownership and action, but that's a conversation for another day. So, at the top is the freedom formula. And this formula is what we're really going to learn. This is the thing. Like this is the mother lode. This is the cornerstone, the foundation really of all inner world training or mental toughness training. Right? And the reason that I call this formula the freedom formula is because when you really get it at the deepest level, and then you apply the practice that accompanies this, then you are freeing yourself from the conditioning of your past that would have you translate the money question, right? That would have you self-impose boundaries, that would have you settle, struggle, and suffer. That would have you use your mind in ways that cause that settling, struggling, and suffering, right? So really, that's the unlearning. Like we're freeing ourselves from the brainwash. We're unbrainwashing ourselves. But it all starts with our thinking, right? How I think governs my states, my emotional states, or my moods. What we're doing here today, you could say, is simply becoming emotional masters, which said another way is becoming thought warriors. Because those two things are inextricably connected, instantaneously and inextricably connected. My thoughts and my states. So let's just do an experiment on that. All right? I want you to think of something that happened in your life that you would interpret as truly tragic. And I want you to really just let yourself, just for a couple seconds here, like go back into that memory. Like really go back and re-experience that. Let yourself do that. And as you're doing that, pay attention to the unique state that instantaneously accompanies that unique selection of thought content. Again, that's mindful language, because you're choosing that thought content. That memory is a thought that you're choosing. When you choose it, pay attention to the state that instantly accompanies it. Now, we're going to change channels, just like on a remote on TV. Now, I want you to think of an event that happened in your life that was absolutely hysterical. Something totally hilarious. That was quick. There may or may not be an inside joke at that table. But as you do that, as you let yourself go ahead and change the content of your mind over to the other end of the spectrum, right, to something really funny as hell. Now notice the state, if you're doing it, notice this, and it can't not happen. The state that instantaneously accompanies that choice of thought content, that particular memory. Okay, so describe the first memory. Give me some words. What were the states that you felt as you chose to fill your mind with the memory of what you consider to be a tragic event? Grief, hopelessness, overwhelm, confusion, sorrow, stress. This is perfect. because those are all obviously what we could call low-grade states. They're unpleasant. Those deactivate intelligence. They release different chemicals like cortisol, which is good if you're like in a survival mode, or if you're a mixed martial artist. There are uses for them, like an offensive lineman in football. You know, but not if you're trying to be like intelligent. Not if you're trying to be masterful. Not if you're trying to be creative. Not if you're trying to be generally successful. So now give me some descriptors of this. Of the opposite, like when you chose to fill your mind with lighter content. How would you describe the state that immediately, because of that choice? Glee. That's an underutilized word. Wasn't this a show? Is that show like long gone? Yeah. Was it a musical? Yes. Was it a show? It was a TV show. Was it good?
No, I don't know.
No. That's the irony. Glee sucked. That's funny. I think it's funny. What else? Glee. What else? Happy. Sorry? Relaxed. Right on. Yeah, and it is instantaneous. And isn't that fascinating? You know, be interested in this, because you know what you just did? You just did something amazing. You just traveled the entire spectrum of available human states. And how long did it take to go from one end to the other? Instantaneous. Isn't that amazing? Class over. There you go. That's how you change your states. It ain't hard. It ain't rocket science. It's even more profound, though. It is. You can alter your state. And you have, please take this with you. You have the ability to access any emotional state always, in every moment of your life, no matter what the circumstance. Do you buy that? Now, we've got thought habits that forbid us to do that. So we need practice. We need to exercise that. All right? And I'm exercising it always. Always. I like to say that the most mentally tough people, also the happiest, and usually the most successful people, those things are all also inextricably connected, choose to exist in a perpetual state of self-inquiry. Meaning, we're always asking the questions like, what state am I thinking myself into right now? Is this state serving me? Could I think better in this moment? What state would be ideal for this circumstance? How am I interpreting this event? So on my way here, you know, I have a home office, so I almost never drive in traffic. That was definitely by design. Well, you know where I'm going with this, right? This morning. So I drove from Chandler. So I got on the 101, and I anticipated that didn't even exist when I was in graduate school, and maybe there was just a boatload of traffic. I know that. I don't know what was causing it. And oh, did you really?
Yeah, it was right in the middle lane. 3 cars.
No kidding. Well, that explains it. So I got off on 60 because my maps told me to.
Yeah.
You can save several minutes. Okay, so I did it, and 60 was actually wide open. But before I got there, so when I got on at Chandler, it was like wide open. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. I'm going like 75 miles an hour. It's incredible. That lasted for like a mile, right? And then hit the wall, right? And my auto response was, shit. I do this for a living. Am I losing credibility right now? No, I'm trying to identify. But that is my auto response, because I'm not finished with having problems with reality. I'm not done there. I'm not there yet. I'm not like the Dasajis in India. I'm working on it every day, right? So my auto response was, this is a problem. This sucks. So I really love being early. I don't do late. I design my life in a way that I'm never late. So I plan to be places way early. So I told you I'd be here by 8. And I texted you when I thought I might not. I actually did get here by 8. Thank you for the positive reinforcement. I don't have to go to the principal's office yet. So, but isn't it interesting? Like that it's just automatic that this is a problem. There's no problem. Where's the problem? That's right. That is boom. That's right. I created it. Who said that? Well done. Redemption. That's so great. Now, yeah, right. I did. Yeah. Maybe. So, I'm sorry?
It's not like your section would start without.
What if it would? What if I didn't leave in an hour? What if I didn't leave myself an hour buffer? What if I just thought it'll take 15 minutes to get here, I'll leave at 8:45?
Then you would have adjusted your life, you would have talked later.
Would it have been a problem if I showed up late?
I would make you feel very awkward.
You can't make me feel anything. No, here's the point. Yeah, I believe that. I would have created an environment that would make it really easy for you to think like shit and feel really bad. That's the only power that she would ever have over me. Do you hear that, though? This is a really important point, joking aside, is that nobody can make you feel anything. Eleanor Roosevelt used to say that all the time, right? She used to say specifically about inferiority, but it's true for anything. Like no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Well, no one can make you feel anything, period. You create that with your interpretations, with your thoughts, right? So let's go ahead and play that through that scenario. I get here late. You're like, where the hell is the dude who's so undercharging? If this person is charging 175, what? I am totally raising my fees. That's amazing. $175,000 for 75 minutes. This is incredible. I feel like such a slouch right now. Yeah, I was simultaneously pumped. I'm like, wow, I'm very affordable. And why am I charging so little? So, so that's so funny. Like this, it's like it made you feel. It made me feel. Those sentences are never true. Oh, he makes me so angry is never a true statement. It sounds unromantic, but it's true. But nobody can make you happy. You could just do things that would, like I was joking, but serious. You could do things that make it easy for people to think in certain ways, but it's all, the thinking is on them. We have these thought habits, though, like I have in traffic, right? That most of us have. Like, who here has a problem with traffic? Who here, as soon as you get in traffic, you're like, oh man, this sucks? Who doesn't? How do you do that?
Because if I'm alive.
Word. I love that. 'Cause
I get lost, I don't know how to get anywhere.
yeah, baby. Woo-sa. That's beautiful. You know, and that's what the Dasajis in India were like. Like, they're just laughing all the time, and they're always saying the phrase that they articulated the most frequently, at least the one that stood out for me the most, that stuck, is, what could be wrong with your truth? Like, what could be wrong with your truth? Like, there's no problem. There's no problem. Oh, this is the mantra that I thought of a second ago. There is no problem in the world. The only problem is the way I see it. Right? There's no problem in the world. The only problem is the way I'm interpreting it. Right? And I really want us to practice taking absolute, complete ownership of that. If we can do that in here today, this whole day was a massive success story. Okay, while I'm thinking of it, here's an invitation to you all, and I really hope that you'll accept this. Stop complaining. I'm not kidding. Start eliminating complaining as a behavior from your life. To just have it, start stopping it. Start eliminating, because it's like you can't just like stop. It's like a boat on water, it doesn't just stop. It comes to a stop. Right? You can stop giving it momentum. What's that? See, that's what right? I wish we all had that. Okay, but let's model it first. Okay? That's the most powerful way that human beings learn, right? It's not through like didactic learning like what you guys do and what I do. It's effective, but it isn't the most. The most effective way for human beings to learn is through modeling. By far. We witness people who we respect behave, and then we mimic that. So we need to be the models. We need to integrate this practice. So stop and just model it, right, for people. So how different is your household when you don't complain? Just think about the effect. That's amazing, right? Like you never complain. Can you visualize that? It's the same thing. Nope. When do we get to the realistic content, dude? Okay, so do you think that if you got paid if you're going to get paid $1,000 to complain less today than you did yesterday, could you pull it off? Oh, okay, now it's realistic. Oh, I'm sorry. Right? You could. Right? And then if you got paid $1,000 every day to complain less the following day, could you do it?
I wouldn't say anything.
Well, no, that's interesting. She said, I just shut my damn mouth. I wouldn't say a thing. However, what's interesting about that is that the vast majority of our complaints happen silently in our minds. They're not even articulated. That's the internal conflict. Just sometimes we say it out loud. So, but could you? This is a really important question. Could you do it if you had the incentive? Could you reduce the frequency of complaining day by day until you think you extinguished that? You think it's a possibility? Yeah. Do you see why you would ever want to do that? Tell me why you would want to do that. And so you would be changing, this is perfect, so you're practicing changing the way you're perceiving the world. Why is that? Why? Okay, so I'm happier. I spend more time on the things I like. So what goes along with that is excellence. Then what an amazing combo platter. Isn't it awesome that as human beings we evolved in a way that it's true that the better I feel, the better I am at things. Isn't that great? So again, we have tremendous incentive to get good at feeling good. And again, that's what we're working on here. So that's my invitation. That's my first invitation to you as a legitimate practice is start eliminating complaining. Now, that would be sort of rookie of me to just leave it there because there should be a suggestion on what to do instead. Right? Because a complaint, by definition, is just a low-grade interpretation of reality. It's me having a problem with what is. Right? So does anybody have an idea on what you could do instead? Let's use the traffic example because it's a simple one and it's a popular one. It's a good starting place. Complaining about traffic is a great training example. So what is an alternative? Yes. Okay, like what? What's find the positive? Like? Okay. More time to talk to my friends. How about any other alternative interpretations?
Dying.
Like, this is better than death? Okay, I guess that works. It qualifies. This is better than dying. That's true. It could be worse. I'm not the one in the accident. Okay, wait, I like this. Could you say that louder?
Change the things you can.
Okay, I love that so much. So which I can never do when I'm in a state of complaint. That's huge. So what she said was change the things that you, instead of complaining, change the things that you can. So in other words, what is it that I have control over? Right? So in many, many circumstances, I have control over very little. But you know what I always have? Yep. I always have control over my interpretation of that's the freedom. That's the best part. Is that's always true. I always have that. But if I forget it, then I am locked in the prison of my conditioned mind, and I am a victim of circumstance. Right? So in that same scenario, what might I have control over?
As far as driving in,
Yeah, I mean, yep.
your route on your phone, change the route.
Yeah. Which I did.
Yeah, maybe even leave a little bit earlier. Change that.
I left an hour early for a 15-minute drive, but I still made it on time. That's actually huge. Right? It's just well, why did I do that? Because I made that a habit, though. Right? I got tired of being late. One time, a friend of mine, we were having lunch up in Scottsdale, and he was 20 minutes late and never even called. I'm like, this is nonsense. So I got up and left, and I drove home. And he called me. He's like, dude, where you at? I'm like, I'm almost home. He goes, you're kidding me. I'm like, no, man. I got to thank you, though. And he's like, oh, man, here comes the sarcasm. And I said, I'm being dead serious. I said, you know, your decision today has actually changed my life because I will never disrespect somebody like that. So I pledge now to never be late, and I haven't. I have never been late. That was like 3 years ago for anything. But it required me to really ask myself, to examine, well, if I was going to get paid $1 billion in like 5 years from now, and all you got to do is keep living the way you are, but never be late for anything, ever, what would I have to do? And it wasn't that hard to figure out. It was just schedule stuff different. Like leave earlier, you know, and space out my appointments and things like that. But that's something that you have control over. So isn't it funny that people know they get in traffic every day, and like, God, and they expect it to be different. Damn it. I'm sorry, I talked over you. I didn't.
But then when there are things that you can't change, so there was nothing else you could change, you changed the way that you
So this is yeah, that's perfect. So when you're at the point where you believe that there's nothing else in your control, and we're often very wrong about that, but whatever. If I am convinced that there's really nothing else that I can change about this scenario, then at a minimum, and I actually want that to be more than a minimum, I can change my interpretation of it and not have a problem. So gratitude is a highly intelligent, always accessible state. Every state is always accessible. But gratitude is a phenomenal default response to a complaint. And we're going to do an exercise a little bit later on called The Problem is the Gift, where we're going to actually literally stretch our minds, expand our thinking again. And I say again because like we did as children naturally before being well educated about our limitations. We're going to practice reinterpreting things that we habitually complain about. So be thinking as we're going through, you know, what are the things that you complain about most frequently? Like if you had like a complaint monitor, what would the subject matter be, subjects that you complain most frequently about? So just start be thinking about that because we're going to actually do work on that. And the work that we're going to do is you're going to literally be changing your interpretation like diametrically, like 180 degrees. And again, it's really important for me to say that this is, when people aren't getting this, they're what's the word? The points of opposition, their objections are like is this like kumbaya? Or am I looking through like life through rose-colored glasses? I'm like, nah, you're not getting it at all. We're actually taking the glasses off. like the glasses, your conditioning of the past is what's having you interpret reality in a distorted way. We're removing that so you can actually experience reality as it is, which isn't problematic. The glasses are what's having you distort your perception of reality, right, into problems. Do you get that? That's liberating. So, sometimes when I'm doing these talks and we get right about here, and sometimes someone who's not getting it will say, so wait a minute, so you're telling me that like I'm driving to work, I have a really important, so I do a lot of work with sales teams, and they're intense people. And they're much like, they are the corporate athlete, really. And they're like, so you're telling me, and I get a flat tire on the way to a huge customer meeting. That was very Trumpy, wasn't it? That's messed up. Can we delete that? Huge. So the guy's asking like, oh, and I get a flat tire, I'm on my way to this meeting, and I'm like supposed to be happy? And I say, you've got it all wrong. You're not supposed to be anything. Like by virtue of you even articulating the question has me know that you're totally missing this point. You're not supposed to be anything ever. You can be anything always. You get a flat tire, I don't know. I don't care how you are. How do you want to be? I don't give a damn how you are, no offense, but it's your call, bro. I'm just here saying that you have options, and they're unlimited. How would you like to be? What do you want to order off the menu? Like the emotional menu, and there's every single state is on the menu. What do you want? So as you're eliminating complaints, gratitude is just a suggestion, but it's a phenomenal one, is to look at, so like in traffic today, I caught myself, and that's the practice, is catch, own, and replace. We'll get to that in a second. It's at the bottom of the page. I'm going to catch myself when I'm thinking poorly, when I'm feeling poorly, and then I want to upgrade it. And you can use gratitude, which is, I'm very thankful for this amazing car that I have. I'm thankful for this 101 that people had to toil over. That's an amazing road, by the way. If you drive around the world, the roads here are amazing. They're the best roads in the world that I know of. They're amazing. They're so wide and clean and well marked, and they're safe, and they're even quiet. They make them with tar with rubber in them, so they're not even noisy. It's amazing. And we're all whining, driving in our air-conditioned cars. It's a huge plus. There's so many pluses. If there are, and there can only be pluses. That's a possibility. It's an option. It's an option. All right, there's a Byron Katie. Has anybody ever heard of her? Byron Katie? Okay, I highly recommend her. Read this book, Loving What Is. That's a great title. Yeah, it's a funny name because her first name is Byron, B-Y-R-O-N, and her last name is Katie, K-A-T-I-E. It's a little seemingly backwards, and they call her Katie. But she's done this work so much that she is a person, and I haven't met her personally, but my former coach is her coach. So I know a lot about her other than just like reading her and watching her on YouTube and stuff. I get some good stories about her. She's a person who's done the work so much, this work, that she is done with having a problem. She doesn't have problems with reality ever anymore. She's done with that. So an example of that is so Byron Katie does these workshops where she'll have like hundreds of people show up at a venue that's just like much bigger than this, but she'll just be up on stage in a big cushy chair, and there's another one. And she'll invite somebody up, say, okay, somebody who wants to do some work, and someone says, I'll do it. And they come up, and she's like, oh, so what's the problem? And and they'll say whatever, like, oh, my kid's not motivated in school, and all that stuff. And she'll just work through it, by asking questions to help them discover that's actually not a problem, except in your mind, because of your interpretation, and you could translate that into anything else that you want. Anyway, the real story here is they're on break. She goes out into the foyer, and this is a true story. A guy comes up to her, puts a gun in her rib cage, and says, "Bitch, I'm going to kill you because you're messing with all these people's minds and you're stealing their money." Her instantaneous response was, "Oh, honey, sweetie, you know, if I were believing the thoughts you're believing, I would shoot me too. Sweetheart, I don't blame you one bit." She's calling a dude with a gun in her rib cage that just threatened her life, sweetie. Everybody in her life is sweetheart and sweetie and honey, even the guy with the gun. No, but you hear her response, though. It's fascinating. Isn't it fascinating? If I were believing the thoughts you're believing, I would have shot me already. What are you waiting for? That's her automatic. There's like, she's bypasses the fear. She's reprogrammed herself. She's not afraid of being shot. She's not afraid of being killed. She's not afraid. She chooses that as an option. And I'm not here saying that we should be like that. I'm just saying if that sounds appealing, we could be. If we work hard at the simple practice of paying attention to our auto responses to reality and upgrading them. Okay? So let's get back to the freedom. Any comments or questions on any of this so far? Yes?
It seems like she also acknowledged his feelings, gave him permission to feel that way, and opened up an avenue for him to feel differently.
That is so brilliant. You're 100% right. And I keep asking another coach of mine who also works with the same coach that coaches her, what happened? And it's like the end of the story is ambiguous. I don't know if she doesn't tell it. Like, I don't know if she pressed charges or not, but the rumor is that the dude broke down in tears when she aligned with him, which I don't even think she was doing for him. She was just like responding like in a sensible way to her. She's like, well, because he said why. He said, I'm going to kill you, and he gave her the reason why. And she's like, well, I hear that. And I guess, if I was believing that logic, I totally would do that too.